change and that tribute to Arthur Rubinstein yesterday.
There can never be one tribute to Rubinstein. He is a mountain. Franz Liszt was also an Everest of the piano, and we were doing all of the Transcendental Etudes. We had only given one performance, and that by Franz Kledat of the once very well-known piece called Ricordanza, which is the 9th in this elaborate set. It's a very difficult work because it's rather long, 9 minutes or so, and it's difficult because it is rather old-fashioned. It's a kind of romanticism that's gone out of date without a doubt.
Is it coming back as part of the Romantic Revival?
Yes, there's this one aspect of it, as we once quoted Busoni saying this is like a packet of yellowed love letters.
Mm-hmm.
It can be very sentimental, and yet it can also be very nostalgic. It's full of garlands, and it's quite an effusion. We have a pianist of wonderful sensibility for it, and that is the Hungarian-born pianist living in England, Louis Kentner. lovely playing by Louis Kentner of a piece which he made very, very beautiful. Remembrance, Ricordanza. That was the 9th Transcendental Etude. We have already played 5 performances of the great one in F minor, Untitled, and our next one will be Harmonies of the Evening, which is number 11, the longest. It's a work that has some of the overripe expression of the Liebestraum, but it also has, and this is quite astonishing for when it was written, its final edition in the early 1850s, it has harmonies that the French Impressionists would indeed latch on to. Let's hear the great pianist Vladimir Ashkenazy in Harmonies of the Evening, the 11th of Liszt's 12 Transcendental Etudes. beautifully felt performance of Harmonies of the Evening, the 11th, yes, the 11th, Transcendental Etude of Liszt.
We'll be back with David Dubal and today's program in just a moment. And now, once again, here's David Dubal. I have a question for you, since this is a natural break at which to present it. The title Transcendental, Chopin wrote Etudes, but Liszt has called it a Transcendental Etude, or a series of them. Did he have anything in particular in mind?
Yes, not meaning the music is transcendental. He meant the execution, the executant powers would, to play them properly, would be transcendental, meaning above what is normal or normally difficult. He made a definite distinction. He knew that these were very difficult, many of them, and as we said, he suppressed the edition which had certain difficulties which were just too complicated for the effect. So he musically refined them. As he grew, he learned how to treat the piano in an incomparable manner. The execution is the thing here, and it was, as I was saying, a new muscularity to the piano technique. You have to play with your shoulder, your arm, your stomach, anything that will make the sonority come out, and the desire for orchestral coloring, which Liszt so desperately tried to achieve on the piano, which Chopin never dared try.
Well, did Chopin not dare because he didn't know how, or is it a matter
Chopin
of...
being a far more brilliant mind in the sense of, I know my limitations, I know my instrument's limitations. Liszt had no desire for limitations. He wanted to show, I can go beyond. And here, of course, then is your definition of his kind of piano technique, which is in many ways easier than Chopin. Although you have to have the muscular energy as well. He invented many devices, blind octaves, interlocking octaves, where Chopin would have considered their use vulgar. He knew of their existence. Liszt himself had already devised many little tricks. And these tricks, as you listen to Liszt, become either repellent to you, or they give you a smile, or you're delighted with the flamboyance. And the more you listen to Liszt, one doesn't have to know the name of the device, blind octaves. What does that mean? Doesn't mean anything unless you play the piano. However, soon you'll start hearing all of the technical devices, the unbelievable chromatic runs, the glissandi, all these massive effects, which could have only happened because Liszt brought about the instrument by his very being. As we were once discussing this piano crusher, well, it wasn't only his fault. They were often pianos with without the great cast iron frames that we now know.
Did he have anything to do with the actual design of the piano mechanism?
He worked with the piano maker in Paris, Arard, and he helped very much there. He was also in communication throughout his whole career with Pleyel and with Steinway in America, with Chickering. They all sent pianos to him.
I see, for his evaluation or whatever.
Yes.
Or for his endurance testing, is the case.
Well, by Chickering and Steinway, they sent it because of the prestige of the man, naturally. If they could get a letter from Liszt saying this is a divine instrument, it coos like a nightingale or something like that, as Rossini said of the Steinway, you would have a lot of piano sold. And the American Steinway became the world's great piano after it won the first prize in the Paris Exposition of 1867.
Which, was Liszt involved in that at all? What did he think of pianos? I mean, did he have a particular favorite instrument? I know there are some pianists nowadays who will play one piano in public and another in private.
He wasn't as particular as many pianists. He was even enchanted with out-of-tune pianos. As I said, he's an experimental person. Sound was very interesting to him. Chopin would lament the fact that in all of Europe there was only one tuner that could suit him. This is not Liszt's type of temperament. So these two friends who were close in many ways, they were very much apart in others, and Chopin once sarcastically said after Liszt reviewed a Paris concert given by Chopin, and it was a very laudatory review, and Chopin sarcastically said, "Ah yes, he will give me a kingdom within his empire." Liszt again was a great public performer, so he couldn't expect in Constantinople to have his favorite piano with him.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
Yeah.
Did I asked you a question once about Brahms, whether he was the type of man that you would want to know? Now,
no, I would have been terrified to know
no,
Brahms.
You said that before.
Oh.
How about Liszt?
I would have been awestruck.
What sort of person was he? I mean, did he make friends easily? Were the relationships superficial?
Well, he was a man that, because you would invariably be caught into the magnetism of his personality, you would be impressed and you would admire him. The great pianist Moritz Rosenthal said, "I have never met anyone more wonderful." With him from Mississippi or Russia. There's a charming book, Musical Study in Germany, by Amy Fay, an American from Mississippi, and and I will in some of these programs read some of the excerpts because they're just dazzling and enlightening, not only about Liszt but about the atmosphere of teaching in Germany at that time. Well, she became a student in Liszt's classes. He didn't teach individually. Would I have liked him? I would have been intrigued by such a man who was a great legend. However, when you're too impressed with anyone, you are really depressed because you feel inadequate. So this is possibly why he also created many enemies among people who couldn't see the larger scale man.
In your descriptions of Liszt and the things he did, the changing of his lifestyle, his outlook even every 5 years, he comes across as a somewhat superficial man, and I'm just wondering...
Don't we all have many masks? He just wore them in public, yeah.
Well, he made a spectacle of his masks. I'm just wondering what he was like as an inner man. Do you have any opinions about that? In other words, his music doesn't seem quite, some of his music.
The inner man was obviously tortured. The religious man, the man who wanted desperately to be secluded from the world, to become a great composer. The other part of him desperately craving applause and admiration. There's a biography by Ernest Newman. If you are a hater of Liszt, then read this, because it's
I'm not a hater
truly...
of Liszt.
No, I don't mean you are. It's truly full of guile and hatred for the man. It's one of the curiosities in musical biography. Ernest Newman, who wrote 4 sublime volumes on Wagner, wrote one on Liszt, and it's a man who obviously had psychological problems with Liszt's personality.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in his lifetime, there must have been many people who were drained by this tumultuous force. So we can only say that your question was how would I have reacted, being sympathetic to the man in the music. I would have been thrilled to have met him. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't have been nervous like Brahms or Beethoven would have possibly shouted at me, and I would have been frightened. Or Liszt would have said, "Have coffee and a cigar."
I think he's that type of man.
Everyone was able to approach him.
He was in Paris for much of the same time as Chopin, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Did they know each other at a fairly young age? They started, at about 17 they ran into each other?
No, they knew each other at age 20, and as I said, that Liszt was Chopin's first biographer. But let me read something, because on these programs we'll have Liszt mirrored by his contemporaries, which is far more interesting than if I met him, or this is meaningless, because Hans Christian Andersen, the author of the charming fairy tales, gives a description of a Liszt concert in 1840. I can't read it all, it's quite long, but it shows a great deal. He writes, "In Hamburg, at the City of London Hotel, Liszt gave a concert. In a few minutes the hall was crowded. I came too late, but I got the best place, close upon the orchestra where the piano stood, for I was brought up by a back staircase. Liszt is one of the kings in the realm of music." 1840 would make Liszt 29 years old. "My guide brought me to him, as I have said, up a back stair, and I am not ashamed to acknowledge this. The hall, even the side rooms, beamed with lights, gold chains, and diamonds. Near me on a sofa reclined a young woman, stout and overdressed. She looked like a walrus with a fan. Grave Hamburg merchants stood crowded together as if they had important business on the stock market to transact. A smile rested on their lips as though they had just sold stock, and won enormously. The Orpheus of mythology could move stones and trees by his playing. The new Liszt Orpheus had actually electrified them before he played. Celebrity, with its mighty prestige, had opened the eyes and ears of the people. It seemed as if they recognized and felt already what was to follow. I myself felt in the beaming of those many flashing eyes and that expectant throbbing of the heart the approach of the great genius, who with bold hands had fixed the limits of his art in our time." Remember, he is very famous at 29 already. Mm-hmm. "London, that great capital of machinery, or Hamburg, the trade emporium of Europe, is where one should hear Liszt for the first time. There time and place harmonize, and in Hamburg I was to hear him." An electric shock seemed to thrill the hall as Liszt entered. Most of the ladies rose. A sunbeam flashed across each face as though every eye were seeing a dear, beloved friend. I stood quite close to the artist. He is a slight young man. Long, dark hair surrounded the pale face. He bowed and seated himself at the instrument. Liszt's whole appearance and his mobility immediately indicate one of those personalities towards which one is attracted solely by their individuality. As he sat at the piano, the first impression of his individuality and the trace of strong passions upon his pale countenance made me imagine that he might be a demon banished into the instrument from which the tones streamed forth. They came from his blood, from his thoughts. He was a demon who had to free his soul by playing. He was under the torture. His blood flowed, and his nerves quivered. But as he played, the demonia disappeared. I saw the pale countenance assume a nobler, more beautiful expression. The divine soul flashed from his eyes, from every feature. He grew handsome, handsome as life and inspiration can make one. Anyone who admires the technique of art must bow before Liszt. He that is charmed with the genial, the divine gift, bows still lower. The Orpheus of our day has made tones sound through the great capital of machinery, and a Copenhagener has said that his fingers are simply railroads and steam engines. Remember, this is the Industrial Revolution. The world is becoming what we know it. His genius is more powerful to bring together the great minds of the world than all the railroads on earth. The Orpheus of our day has preached music in the trade emporium of Europe, and at least for a moment, the people believed the gospel. The spirit's gold has a truer ring than that of the world. From Hamburg, I found Liszt was to fly to London, there to strew new tone bouquets, there to breathe poetry over material working-day life. Happy man who can thus travel throughout his whole life, always to see people in their spiritual Sunday dress. Yes, even in the wedding garment of inspiration. And this was the cool very cool Hans Christian Andersen becoming rhapsodic.
I'm just wondering whether it's his genius or the sheer power of his presence that really people reacted to.
Both.
You think it was both?
Both. Let's hear the last Transcendental Etude in a performance by Bolet. This is my favorite one, Chasse-Neige. Jorge Bolet in the 12th Etude, Chasse-Neige. In some ways, the most impressive of the whole set, and I think musically, the inside tremolos, technically, are very difficult to play. In this work, it gives the gloomy, rather sinister impression of a whole landscape being slowly and relentlessly covered with snowdrifts. I think it's an amazing work. Remember, this is Liszt's first major collection of works, and he was like a challenge to the world. And there's where you get the transcendental execution in the title. It also marked him as an important voice in the new Romantic school. Schumann, in reviewing these, had mixed feelings and said, well, perhaps when I hear Liszt play them, but as far as I can see, only 5 people in the world could play them. Let's hear Chasse-Neige, Swirling Snow, in a performance by Lazar Berman. what mood Berman captures in this 12th etude. On our next program, perhaps we should play this again, and maybe one more performance of Harmonies of the Evening. We'll continue playing piano music of Liszt in the other etudes he wrote, 2 concert etudes, the 6 Paganini etudes, and others. We'll go on in other directions that he pursued in his life, the years of pilgrimage, where he is a nature worshipper. And there's the demonic Liszt, the Liszt of the Mephisto waltz. And there's the religious Liszt. And of course there's always the erotic Liszt. These are the great elements of his compositional personality. The religious, the satanic, the erotic, and of course the Chopinesque influence. Always the Paganini influence of dazzling virtuosity. And in his orchestral works, the next step after Berlioz. And the 3 great influences of Liszt's life: Chopin, Berlioz, and Paganini. Thank you for listening.